All right, well, hello again to everybody who will be watching this video. As always, I'm Will Driscoll, the Executive Director for the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame, and the Hall, in partnership with the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters, Cuddyer Wellness Programs, and countless other stakeholders in youth and collegiate athletics, are pushing the conversation forward on mental health and wellness in sports with the formation of the Youth Sports Mental Health and Wellness Alliance. The Alliance aims to decrease the stigma around mental health and wellness and also provide resources to help create positive sports experiences. In 2023, we are going to use our hashtag Sports Mental Health Monday social media campaign to provide content on topics associated with sports and mental health in youth and intercollegiate athletics. And joining us today to talk about mental health in sports is two-time Major League Baseball All-Star and 2018 Virginia Sports Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Cuddyer. Michael has been a big supporter of our efforts when the Hall first began this conversation back in 2019, and he offers a unique perspective from his time playing and now coaching. Michael, thanks as always for joining us to talk about a myriad of subjects.
Yeah, my pleasure, Will.
Well, our March focus for the Youth Sports Mental Health and Wellness Alliance and this campaign has been on communication. And you have plenty of ways to look at this, whether it's as a former athlete yourself, the parent of youth athletes, or as a coach. And that's really what we want to focus on right now. I want to focus on that role as a coach. You've coached youth teams, but now you're also working with USA Baseball and managing their 18U national team. As a coach, how do you communicate the importance of this issue of sports and mental health to your players?
Well, I think the first thing, and I think this goes with all aspects of coaching, of sports in general, is self-awareness. Number one, self-awareness starts with understanding, your role as a coach. What is your role as a mentor? What was it like when you were a player? If you were a player, the anxieties, the pressures that you had to go through to the point where you are right now. And for me in particular, I'm able to take all of those feelings that I had as a youth all the way through my professional career and kind of use that wisdom and have a pulse on what the athletes are going through and be able to see if pressure's weighing on them and then be able to start conversations. And, as far as on the USA team, well, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but I remember what it was like to have that pressure and to have that weighing down on me. And to be able to use that experience and ask them questions and the right questions and just not be afraid to talk about what it is that they're going through.
What is the responsibility of a coach when it comes to promoting mental health for your players?
Well, I think the responsibility is making sure our players are in a good place mentally. And, they've got so many, our youth has so many things going on with them in today's day and age, in today's sports, school, socially, social media, on top of performing. We don't know what their home dynamics are like, what's going on, the pressures they're feeling behind closed doors. We as coaches only get to see what they're dealing with on the field. So I think it's important to ask questions without trying to pry too much into their personal lives, but to be able to understand what it is, that the dynamics of what they're going through and why they had a bad day, why they look down, why they're not putting the effort that you are expecting with them as a player. And I think talking about expecting, I think laying out expectations that you have on them as a coach prior to the day starting or prior to the season starting. It's not fair for us as coaches to have these expectations on players, whether they live up to them or not, if we don't communicate what those expectations are to the players.
How important is that effective communication? It's funny because we as humans, we communicate daily, and communication seems like something that should just be innate in what we do. But sometimes you see lack of communication leading to issues. So how do you as a coach use that effective communication to communicate that to your players?
Right. And I think lack of communication oftentimes come with assuming. We as coaches, as players, as human beings, we assume a lot of things, because we think it or we're thinking things every day. I'm thinking about baseball every day, so I'm assuming that everybody else on the baseball field is also thinking about baseball every day, and that's far from the case. I would say I'm probably the abnormal one that's thinking baseball every day. So I think that's where a lot of the lack of communication comes from as coaches, is that we assume we're constantly thinking about the strategy game, or we're constantly thinking about, so then we come down on them really hard if they're not on the same page as us. So I think that's where communication, and that's where, even if you're repeating yourself hundreds of times, that's what's needed. And it's not to remind them, it's just that because they haven't been thinking along the same lines as us as players. And it's not fair to put our assumptions or our expectations on these players when we haven't talked to them about what it is that we're thinking or we're assuming as coaches.
We know that a lot of times coaches are judged by wins and losses. And that's just the reality of sports. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we now know that there's a lot more that goes into just being a coach, and keeping, the players in a good state of mind. So any advice or tips for coaches, not just you as a coach, not just the people that are going to be on your staff, but just coaches in general, on how to keep those lines of communication open with their players beyond just the action on the field?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we are judged on wins and losses depending on what level you're coaching. I think that's the biggest thing. We're all human beings at the end of the day. And I'm not going to be naive enough to understand that I know every coach's job or what every coach's job depends on, but I do know that at most youth levels, they're not going to get hired or fired based on how many wins or losses they've had. So by taking a step back and understanding what truly is important in the development of our youth, I think that will help out first and foremost, and understanding how we can communicate with our players based on that, understanding that at the 11U level or 10U level, and we're a coach, the winning and losing is an important lesson to learn, but it's not the motivation factor for most of our kids.
And I think a lot of that comes into just keeping that effective communication open. If you communicate your expectations to the players, to the parents, to anybody associated with the athlete, I think that's going to be a better atmosphere for everybody involved. And March, like I said, has been our focus. Communication has been our focus. And we've talked to you, we've talked to parents of student athletes, we've talked to student athletes as well. But in April, we're going to be looking at mental health versus mental performance. And there's a lot of, I think, confusion out there between the two terms. When you hear mental health and mental performance, what comes to your mind when you hear those two terms?
Well, mental health to me is being in a good frame of mind. I can take you back to 2005, where it was the first year I really had a chance to play every day in the major leagues, and I didn't live up to my expectations in that season. And because of that, every day I went to the field, I had anxiety. I didn't want the next day to come quickly, so I would stay up until 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't happy when I went to the field, and my performance suffered because of that, because of those anxieties, because of the pressures that I was feeling. So to me, if I was equipped with ways to deal with that in a more productive way, I would have been in a better spot with my mental health. Now let's fast forward to 2013. 2013 was the first year that I really committed fully to mental performance. And when I say mental performance, self-talk and getting me prepared to go out and play the game to the best of my ability, and having confidence in myself, and believing that the work that I was putting in was allowing me to deserve to have success, and learning different strategies to be able to allow me to have that confidence was now maximizing my performance out on the field. And not coincidentally enough, it was the first year the year I won the batting title, had a 27-game hit streak, and other really good things that happened in my career because I fully committed to believing in myself. And I think that is the beginning of mental performance.
You just offered that great firsthand perspective. Now, as you're moving into coaching, on the national team level with the 18U national team, how do you make sure that your team knows the difference between mental health and mental performance? Knowing that a lot of these players, you have a very small window with them, so you have that short amount of time to kind of impart this knowledge on them.
Right, and there is a blending, obviously, of mental health and mental performance. You have to overcome your fears, anxieties, nervousness, everything, whatever words, whatever vocabulary you want to use, you have to be able to overcome that. Not necessarily overcome it, but learn to deal with it to then be able to perform at a maximal level. So, and again, that's having a pulse on your team and the players that you have, whether it's some guys' motivational speeches, or some it's just listening to stories of how I dealt with things, or how other coaches or other players dealt with these pressures, whether it's the pressure of having bases loaded and 2 outs in the bottom of the 7th inning, whatever the case may be. How did I deal with that? How did I understand those situations? And oftentimes as athletes, you just want to hear that it's okay. It's okay to have these thoughts. It's okay to have these anxieties, these anxious moments, this nervousness, this uncertainty in what is about to happen, and what the finality of the situation is going to look like. It's okay to have those uncertainties go through your head. And I think as athletes, you just want to understand that you're not alone in those situations. So I think being able to pull from those experiences from a player's perspective to use that as a coach's perspective is what will help me.
The input and the insight that you're providing kind of leads us into the next topic, which is emotional vulnerability. And emotional vulnerability, as we've kind of talked about it in some of our other alliance meetings, and even just kind of in general conversation, is the ability to share your experiences with others. How important is that for not just the team that you're coaching, but just athletes in general, just people in general? When you hear the term emotional vulnerability, what does that term describe for you, Michael Cuddyer?
Well, it's exactly what you just said. It's being willing to share those times when you were, I think the old school way of saying it, soft, right? Like being able to share those, being okay, being so secure in who you are as a human being that you're willing to share those times when you were struggling, and understanding that it's okay that you struggled, because these athletes are struggling, and that's all they want to hear most of the time is, man, it's okay to have these thoughts. It's okay to be uncertain in your ability. It's okay to not know what is about to happen. It's okay to be afraid that you're going to fail. It's okay to be anxious. I think that's the first step in learning how to deal with those thoughts and with those feelings, is that that, man, this person that is coaching me, or this person that is my mentor, or this person that I look up to, also dealt with these same feelings, and they made it, or they're still dealing with it. And that to me is being emotionally vulnerable, is being willing to not just say toughen up, or, man, I had to walk through snow and 20-degree weather to get to school. You need to toughen up or get through it. That to me is just compounding the effect and compounding these uncertainties and these insecurities that these athletes are having.
We have we've talked about a lot of topics so far with the Alliance, and really the Alliance and this social media campaign, Sports Mental Health Monday, is really focused on pushing the conversation forward, keeping it going. How does that emotional vulnerability help us with pushing that conversation forward? You mentioned it's the first step, but how does it get us to that next step?
Well, then we're not afraid to continue the conversation. Then we're not afraid. The first step, once you can let down your guard and talk about these anxieties that you had, and it doesn't have to just be in sports. Obviously, majority of our coaches have learned and have gained their wisdom in their professions, their businesses, their experiences throughout their adult life and childhood. And majority of the time that doesn't even deal with sports, but being willing to talk about it and will at least open the door to continue those conversations. And we talk about communication, being okay to then now travel in your past and understand more spots. And maybe you're even, and I know for me, for certain, as I've gotten further away from my playing days, I've been able to pull more layers of the things that I was feeling when I was playing and how I dealt with a lot of the things that I was playing on the fly, which then hopefully can help some of the athletes and young people that I'm able to come in contact with now. But also it continues to help me learn how to continue to deal with anxieties that I had as a coach or as a parent.
Well, we appreciate everything that you do, whether it's with our group or whether it's within the community or now with USA Baseball. We know that you're taking this positive message into everything that you do. And so we appreciate you for that. And we also appreciate you for joining us today as part of this ongoing conversation. So Michael, thanks again for taking the time.
My pleasure, as always.
Well, for everybody who will be watching and following along, remember this conversation is featured as part of our #Sports Mental Health Monday campaign throughout 2023. We will be sharing content and information featuring our alliance partners. Weekly posts can be found on the Hall of Fame social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn, as well as the Hall of Fame's website, www.vasportshof.com. Be on the lookout for more #Sports Mental Health Monday throughout the year. And thanks again for following along.